Hi, my name is Florence Cofield, and I am taking EDU 1107. And today I'll be doing my presentation on social interactionist theory of language development by Bernstein. And of course, we know that there are other theories that are out there that are similar to what he's relating his theory to. Um, but here are two questions that I would like for you to ask yourself if you are familiar with situations as these. So at the end of the clip, we can talk a little more about it, or you can respond to this clip. But the first question or response that I would like for you to respond to is, what children need to know is essentially available in the language they are exposed to. What do you think about that? What children need to know is essentially available in the language they are exposed to. Is that something that you believe in? Is your theory differently? What do you think? What children need to know is essentially available in the language they are exposed to. Next, Littlejohn, 2002, suggests that Bernstein's theory shows how the language people use in everyday conversation both reflects and shapes the assumptions of a certain social group. What do you think about that one? Littlejohn suggests that Bernstein's theory shows how the language people use in everyday conversation both reflects and shapes the assumptions of a certain social group. You can write down these statements and tell me what you think. And we'll discuss this a little more after the clip. Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, as we mentioned before, there were two uh, statements that I want you to respond to at the end of the clip. And it's basically revolving around what are your interpretations of social interaction and when it starts. Basically the stages. According to Bernstein's theory, and like I mentioned before, there are some other theories out there that relates to what he's stating. And one of those are that from birth, children are surrounded by others who talk to them or with them. And this starts at birth. So it says children are surrounded by others who talk to them or with them. This communication plays a part in how the baby learns to speak his or her native language. What do you think about that? I highly think that when a baby is in a mother's womb, and it's said that whenever you speak to them baby talk, that they they hear you and they develop your voice. They learn your voice, and what I would recommend, and it's also stated in here as well, as babies acquire language in order to survive, have their needs met, and express themselves. Children learn language out of need to function in society. So what I was mentioning a little second ago is that whenever a child is in a mother's womb, instead of us speaking the baby talk, why don't we just speak to them like a normal child? And we speak to them with complete sentences, very proper, and there's no limit. We shouldn't put a limit on what a child could learn based on their ages. I would recommend anyone to reach out to their children to the best of their ability as soon as possible and teach them words and teach them how to be social interactive with other kids or students. The social interaction theory assumes that language acquisitions is influenced by their social surroundings. Now, uh, it's completely different from having your child at home by themselves, no other siblings in the home with mommy and daddy, versus being in childcare. Being in childcare, they're surrounded by other children, so they get to socialize. They get to pick up the things that they see other kids do, and they bring it home. So according to this part of the theory, the social interaction theory, assumes that language acquisitions is influenced by their social surroundings. I agree to that. I highly agree to that. Children observe the interaction between other people, and then their behavior develops inside of them. This means that the child first observes the adults around him or her communicating amongst themselves, and then later develops the ability that themselves communicate. And as we know that children, they pick up things that they see adults do. That's why we're careful with the things that we do and say around them, because like I mentioned before, we should not put a limit on what a child or what we think a child could learn, because when they're young, we never know what their knowledge expectations may be. Educate them the minute they come out of the womb, while they're in the womb. Speak to them, and they pick up on those things. They remember those voices. A child learns best when interacting with those around him to solve a problem. In this clip, I picked up two photos. One with a child being alone versus being in a classroom with others, as what we call now is cooperative learning, or in a group to where they're all interacting among each other. And they learn from that. Sometimes when we're teaching a child in the classroom versus teaching a class or teaching a child one-on-one, and being in that group is completely different, a different style of teaching, because there's another student or another child that's in that group where that child could help another child, and they pick up easily because another child is teaching them something that we thought we could teach them better. But it all depends on the child and where their mindset is at that time. At first, the adult interacting with the child is responsible for leading the child, and eventually the child becomes more capable of problem solving on his own. And we all know that. Sometimes we can preach to our children, and we can tell them rules after rules after rules, and eventually they get it. They learn, and they think, and they have creative minds, and they'll think before they react, and that's a good thing. This is true with language. As the adult first talks at the child, and eventually the child learns to respond In turn, the child moves from gurgling to baby talk to more complete and correct sentences. Bruner, best known for his discovery learning theory, believes that learners, whether they are adults or children, learn best when they discover knowledge for themselves. And that's why in the classrooms today we leave children to be independent, because we have to put them in all different situations. We have to give them that teaching instruction. We got to allow them to be in a cooperative learning group, and we also have to give them that one-on-one. And when they're having that one-on-one with themselves and they're pushing themselves to get things done, not only are they getting it done, but they're remembering those stages, because they're actually taking those stages or getting to those going through those steps alone. So they're memorizing what they're doing instead of someone telling them what to do. He believes that students retain knowledge best when it is something they have discovered on their own, and that is very true. The interaction between the two, such as games and nonverbal communication, build the structure of language long before the child is able to communicate verbally. What do you think? The interaction between the two, such as games and nonverbal communication, build the structure of language long before the child is able to communicate verbally. Students interact with the world by exploring and manipulating objects, wrestling with the questions and controversies, or performing experiences. As a result, students may be more likely to remember concepts and knowledge discovered on their own. And that's just like what we mentioned before. When students are interacting on their own, they're actually taking the time and they're developing those knowledge skills step by step. So we're going to refer back to those two statements that I asked you to respond to.